So the fourth movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is called Ode to Joy, so we figured let's make our Ode to Joy in this episode.
Hi, this is Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies.
All right, Alex. So you already introduced our topic for the day, but to officially call it out, it's movies that shaped our feeling of joy. And it's good timing to be talking about joy because it's the holidays and joy is something joy is relevant no matter what time of the year it is, but especially relevant during the holiday time. So I guess I can kind of talk through a little bit about how I thought about this episode and really what joy means to me. And it's an interesting one because we've had episodes on comfort and happiness and things like that. And to me, joy is kind of an amalgamation of all of those things, right? Like it is about happiness. It is about that spirit of bringing people together, sharing, but there's also a little note of melancholy as I see it, especially in my movies. I like the movies that earn that feeling of joy. And the character of the story have to kind of go through a bit of a rite of passage, if you will, to find that, because then the landing is sweeter for them, but also for me as a viewer. So that's kind of how I thought about this list. And also movies that have kind of been in my rotation canon for a while, because I think there's something about, again, that feeling of comfort, that's something that's familiar to you that I feel like gives the gift of joy more and more the more you watch it, because you kind of know you're not really bothered about the story beats, after the 10th or 12th watch, if you will, because you know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think back. Like you mentioned, we did an episode already on comfort movies, and I feel like that is a very different thing than joy. Comfort is for me, and those movies were sort of like a warm blanket where it sort of like lulls you into a feeling of just relaxation and bliss. Whereas joy is a very strong emotion where you sometimes you cry if things are very joyous. You get very energized because things are you want to jump up and be like, yeah, making you cannot help but smile. And that is when putting this list together, I was thinking not only about the movies that just every time I watch them, either, I can't help but smile and just feel really good. And sometimes, again, like kind of want to jump out of my seat and just cheer what's going on. But also thinking too, well, why are these movies doing this to me? What are the things in my life that give me joy? What are the things that every time I do them or see them or experience them, I do get that same sense of you can't wipe the smile off my face. Again, sometimes it is so extreme that you cry because you're so happy. Like that to me is really what pure joy is. And the films that I'm bringing today not only do make me feel joyous whenever I watch them, but do connect back to things that I've realized either through watching these films and analyzing, well, why does this make me smile every time I see it? Or I have very specific things in my life that every time, they always give me joy. And that's what I use these films for, to remind me of those things in those times.
I agree. Love it. Okay. With that said, should we dive into your number 3?
My number 3 movie that shaped my sense of joy is That Thing You Do! ! From 1996. I love when movie titles put punctuation in there. I guess I should say That Thing You Do. Is that I don't know. Anyway, this is a film written and directed by Tom Hanks, starring Tom Hanks, Liv Tyler, Tom Everett Scott, Steve Zahn, and Giovanni Ribisi. The IMDb plot summary: a local Pennsylvania band scores a one-hit wonder in 1964 and rides the star-making machinery as long as they can, with lots of help from their manager. So this movie, I'll kind of talk briefly about the different things in this movie that to me give me those feelings of joy, and then I'd love to talk to you about the film and then kind of dive into the film more itself. So for me, this movie, because like the plot summary describes, is about this small band who's sort of a pickup band, the garage band, for lack of a better word, that then all of a sudden has this big success, and they are this one hit wonder, and seeing their success as a group, and that's something to me that definitely brings me joy of seeing and sharing in the success of a team that I'm on or an endeavor that I'm doing, whether it's a performance. I was involved a lot in musical groups in high school and college, and that sense of when things are coming together and you're going out there and you're really gelling as a group, that definitely does make me have that sense of joy and that feeling of happiness. It's also great too to see that just as a other people experiencing it in this film, that joyous moments of like when they first hear their song on the radio, or the parents of one of the band members, they're watching their kid on television for the first time and just seeing that their sense of pride in their other people, which is definitely something that can give me a sense of joy. And then, just from a surface level, this movie set in the mid 60s. I really love the mid 60s aesthetic, especially this guitar pop music of the time, like the Monkees and the Archies and Lovin' Spoonful, the Zombies, the Beatles. This is all music that, even though I did not grow up in the 60s, I was not even born yet. I grew up with that music through oldie stations, and it does bring me this sense of joy. And this music is so sweet and fun, and every time I listen to it, it makes me happy. And this is something that this movie does a brilliant job, even though this band did not exist and the music was all written for the film. It captures that spirit of that mid 60s guitar pop that always brings me joy. So those are sort of the high level reasons why this film relates to me so much, and every time I watch it, I just cannot stop smiling. So had you seen this film? And let's talk a little more about the film.
Yeah, I'd not seen the movie. I obviously know of the song, and I don't know why, for whatever reason, never watched this movie. So I was very happy to check it out. I know it's Tom Hanks's directorial debut, I
It
think.
is. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wrote
Yeah.
his screenplay debut too. He'd never
Yeah.
written anything at this
Yeah.
point.
But the song is, I always knew of the song, the title song. So it's fun to check it out. I agree with you. The 60s vibe gives me a lot of joy to the bright colors, and the music paired with that is an instant joyous thing. So this is very much in my wheelhouse. I was really happy to check it out. And then I agree. I think the movie is the most joyous, but also works the most when those celebratory moments are happening, when these characters are, feeling a sense of validation, or their song is, hits on the radio. That amazing scene when they all run to the electronic store of the
Yes.
parents of one of the kids, Liv Tyler, everybody like that. I wanted to like jump up from my seat and cheer. It
Yeah.
really captures that kind of unadulterated joy so beautifully in obviously period costume, and all of it. Like, it's amazing. So I really enjoyed the movie in that sense. I will say though, and maybe this is because the whole music biopic trope land is so familiar to us now, that how this band disintegrates and how the love story between Liv Tyler and Thomas Everett Scott sort of
Oh yeah.
happens, like all of those
Yeah.
things are like very messy. There's really no reason for the lead singer to start to drift away. It just doesn't feel really tied up very well together. And then the second thing, which I'm curious to hear your take on this, but the main lead, the drummer, Thomas Everett Scott, to me feels like is doing a Tom Hanks impression throughout the entire movie.
Oh, interesting.
And I found that so distracting, because I just was like, it's almost like Tom Hanks wanted to be in this movie, or this actor just picked up Tom Hanks's mannerisms, just did that, and Tom Hanks, being the director, was like, yep, keep doing that. That's pretty good. So there's something about that I don't know. I found it to be distracting. But other than that, the movie is really fun. The music is really good. And it definitely hits the spot from like a joy standpoint. So I was happy to watch it.
I mean, I've seen this movie maybe a half a dozen times. I saw it growing up I may have seen this in the theater, and I just loved the soundtrack and watched a lot. I've actually never thought of that before on the Tom Hanks, essentially like an impersonation, for lack of a better word. I think, yeah, that he definitely is. He feels like a mid 80s Tom Hanks when he was in all those comedies in the mid to late 80s. He's doing a lot of that. And I wonder if it is a lot of just Tom, because he wrote the movie too. Much like how Woody Allen, especially after he became too old to stars of his own movies, he would cast these people to basically just playing himself in these movies, and he'd write them too. I wonder if this Tom Hanks kind of did the same thing here too, because it is actually kind of now that I think more about it, like a spot on sort of impersonation of a Tom Hanks in 1986, what he would do with a part like this. And he kind of even looks a little bit like him. The mannerisms are similar to him. That's really interesting point. I never I never really thought about that. But yeah, like not only do I love that scene too of the everyone running down the street and you see, the putting all the song on all the radios in the appliance store. But I also just love seeing the evolution of the song and how it's
Yeah,
sort of the happy accidents of they wrote the song, it's sort of a slow song, and then accidentally the drummer just starts too fast on one
I
performance.
love
And
that
all of a
scene
sudden now
too.
it's like a dance song, and that's what sort of makes it a hit. And it's sort of fun because in the beginning of the movie, it's about a one-hit wonder band. You sort of know where this is going to go. And like you said, it's very predictable in every single possible way. But there's also, a sweetness to that. It's just a simple
Yeah.
story of a band who starts out and they accidentally fall into this, have a big hit song, and the whole thing disintegrates overnight. But, in the end of the movie, there's one of my favorite things in movies when they end with like the photos from the yearbook or whatever. It's like, what happened to these, like
Mm,
the Animal House ending or whatever. And all the stories are all have happy endings. Like
yeah.
nothing bad happens to any of these people. Even the one guy who is obsessed with being in the army and he leaves the band to go essentially serve in Vietnam. And any kind of other movies, like, okay, he died and blah blah blah. Like, but no,
Right.
he doesn't die. Like no one dies. Like, and Tom Everett Scott and Liv Tyler get together for some reason, even though they don't. It's like for the purpose of the plot. It's like, okay, fine, they have a
It
romance,
made
whatever.
no
Like it
sense
made no
why.
sense.
Yeah, that's my thing, right? Like, there's a very, very good movie in here, not to be critical because it's still very joyous and
You can be
fun,
critical of it, yeah.
which is that I wish they had dealt with the conflict beats just better. It's a screenplay, like
Yeah,
these things
yeah.
just don't really add up. I'm happy with even predictability if it's done well and it makes sense. It just doesn't really make sense. But I do love that what you said that everybody gets a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
I
I
mean,
like
I
that.
think the screenplay is very, yeah, lighthearted. Hanks's direction is very breezy and simple, and there's nothing, he's not trying to be showy or
No.
overcomplicated here. It's just a very paint by numbers story. But I think the colorful production design, the energy of all the young stars in the film, and also
Yeah.
Tom Hanks, I think, does a fun job coming in as their manager in the
Yeah.
movie. And he sort of plays not like overly nice manager, but not like a mean one either. He sort of understands and knows that this band is not going to last very long. But he does a fun performance too, and I always love Tom Hanks in a movie as well. So I think overall, this movie is incredibly sweet and simple, almost like a TV movie. But performances and just again the incredible
The
songs
music is
is
amazing.
just is so good. Which I guess the songwriter of these songs was the lead singer of Fountains of Wayne, and he passed away during COVID. So definitely R.I.P. to him. I
Oh,
think this is some of his best sort of pastiches of '60s pop, but he does it so well. You think all these songs are real, but none of
yeah.
them are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also,
No.
fun fact: this is where Tom Hanks's production company Playtone comes from. Is
Right.
this movie, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
a fun little nod every time I see that. And if it's like
Yeah.
his Band of Brothers or like the Pacific, it's like Playtone. I'm like, oh yeah, that thing you do, cool.
Yeah.
That makes me smile just seeing that company logo.
Yeah. I have to give a shout out to Liv Tyler as well. Like, I had not seen her in a movie in a while, and I was like, she's so good in this
She's
movie.
so good.
She has such a. I wish people knew what to do with her because she kind of was at a time where I guess people are not writing characters that were fully formed. And but even with the little bit she's given to do in this movie, she makes so much out of it. Her presence is so noteworthy. She pops and has like a lot of layers and textures to her performance, who's kind of the woman, left behind, if you will, and is along for the ride, but is not really noticed, but is still not forgettable.
Hmm.
I love that. She actually stole the movie from a performance standpoint in my mind.
Yeah, she's a great actress. I used to like her a lot in
Yeah.
the '90s, and yeah, I don't know really kind of where her career went. I also point out Steve Zahn. I think also does a great job in this too. Is sort of the wacky zany part of
Yeah.
the band. I think this is a star turn for him in terms of starting off on his little run that he had for a couple years. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. Glad you enjoyed
Yeah.
it. So let's move on to your number three movie that shaped your sense of joy. What do we got, Karan?
Okay. If you're moving to a very different part of the world and time period with my number three is Sense and Sensibility from 1995, directed by Ang Lee, written by Emma Thompson, and an adaptation of a Jane Austen novel, obviously, starring Emma Thompson, Kate Winslet, Alan Rickman, Hugh Grant, a whole bunch of folks. A quick logline: rich Mr. Dashwood dies, leaving his second wife and her three daughters poor by the rules of inheritance. The two eldest daughters are the title's opposites. What? This is the log line? Okay, sure.
The title's opposites. Oh, like the
Yeah,
sense
Sense
and
and
sensibility. They
Sensibility.
represent each of the. Oh, someone's getting really clever on that little
Yeah,
plot
this is
summary
not the
there.
best log
Trying
line.
trying to write their thesis or something.
But this is obviously a classic, and I think most people are aware of the story because it's a famous Jane Austen novel. I didn't grow up watching or even reading, for that matter, any Jane Austen stuff, but I think this is probably the first adaptation of hers that I actually watched. But for me, this is on the list for joy is because of, I think I've shared this on the podcast before. English countrysides and such bring me a lot of joy. They make me really happy. So there's that aspect to it. And then I think the credit goes to the performances, the direction, and Emma Thompson's writing, that we've typically known period drama, especially set in the English world, to be stuffy and stodgy, or they can be, versus this movie just has so much of like sense of fun and joy and romp
Mm-hmm.
to it, that this story, the way the story is timeless. There's a reason why Jane Austen is Jane Austen, but its rendition in this movie is just so timeless that you can imagine yourself in it, no matter what age, what time period you might be watching this movie, and it sort of transcends. So I think that's why, like, there's so much fun and joy in this movie in terms of coming of age and sibling relationships, and the mockery of the class system and the weird rules that come with it. Like, all of that brings me a lot of joy, and you get to see beautiful English countryside, which brings me a lot of joy. So yeah, that's why this is on my list. Great performances, and of course we'll dive into it. But had you watched this movie, and if so, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I had it, but not in so long, and I was so young.
Yeah.
It was like a movie probably my sisters and mom were watching at one point. Like
Mm,
I remembered seeing the broad strokes of it, but hadn't actually
mm,
sat down as an adult and watched it. And it's very joyous and just such an amazing adaptation of this book. And a lot of credit is due to Ang Lee and due to Emma Thompson. And it really did kickstart, that whole Jane Austen craze in the 90s. And I
mm-hmm.
think just paying attention now to the direction and the different choices Ang Lee made in this is just amazing. Honestly, like the craft of this movie and how he brought in modern, camera movements, editing. There's like little zooms. He's editing back and forth between people during comedy beats. There's
Yeah.
handheld camera use at several times in this, which I know you love Merchant Ivory. I'm not trying to slag them off
Yeah.
or anything like that, but the Merchant Ivory style is very like, locked in cameras,
Yeah.
very, very
Very classic.
simple, classic direction.
Yeah.
And we did cover A Room with a View a while back for the
Hmm.
travel destination episode. And I remember commenting and thinking too that movie felt very modern in its performances and in its dialogue a little bit, mainly in the performances, but the direction was not modern at all. And I think when
Yeah.
Ang Lee sort of takes that baton and says, okay, well, now we're going to have, yes, more of modern acting styles and more, colorful characters, but I'm going to bring it into the direction and make this basically feel like this is a modern film set in, the whatever the 17 1800s.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just so in awe of that, how he was able to make the film seem modern and fresh just through these directing choices. And it felt like this could have been a contemporary, comedy,
Yeah.
but
Could be
but
anywhere,
what it wasn't.
anytime.
Yeah.
And performances too, like there are all these amazing making of videos of this movie, and the actors talking about how Ang Lee would show up and say to Emma, "Don't look so old," or to Kate Winslet, like, you seem boring and what have you. And at the beginning they found these comments and these direction notes to be a little bit startling, because these are
Mm-hmm.
all like English actors, and here's this sort of foreign gentleman dealing with almost that's Jane Austen, which is sort of so classic British. And but I think it was all by design, because the makers of the movie wanted this kind of fresh take on it. And what Ang Lee was trying to do was to not make this, again, not to throw Merchant Ivory movies under the bus, because I love them. He was not trying to make that. He wanted
Right.
these people
Right.
to live and breathe as if they were from today. And
Mm-hmm.
that comes through, and the performances are amazing. The story is, a classic story, right? Of people coming of age, understanding the value of love and what love even means. But all this is happening within the class structure.
Mm-hmm.
How does money move? How does inheritance move? What sort of agency do women have in this time period? And all of these themes are still very resonant. But I think, to me, the most resonant theme of the movie is that of kind of finding love and what love means. And you
Mm-hmm.
really see, as the title says, Sense and Sensibility. In Kate Winslet's mind, love is all about this, knight in shining armor, somebody who writes poetry, is this, dreamboat guy who actually does show up, who
Yeah.
Greg, played by Greg Wise, who's
Yes.
actually Emma Thompson's real life husband. So that's kind of a fun thing there. But those scenes are absolutely hilarious and funny and joyous. How the entire family is like fawning all over him, only to find out later that, what meets the eye may not be
Right. He's a
the right
fraud,
thing.
basically.
He's a
Yeah.
fraud.
Well, not fraud, but he's lying about a lot of things about
He's
his
lying a lot
past.
of things
Right,
in the
right.
past, and he's sort of a
Leading her
weak
on.
character. This whole
Yes.
thing is kind of a put up. I wouldn't call him like, and that's the clever thing about Jane Austen's writing, is that people are never black and white. They're all gray.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is flawed in there. Even our heroines are flawed in this movie as well. Like Kate Winslet is like, very impulsive, would drop off at the beat of her, of anything really. On the other hand, Emma Thompson's character, who's trying to keep the family together, is playing sort of the older, maturer one in the family now
she's
that
got the
their
sense.
father isn't there, and she's
She's
got the sense.
She's got that
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the Sixth Sense. That's another film, but
she's very much trapped in that, and is not sort of fighting for her own life and our own love and desires, and that's not great either. I love her and Hugh Grant, and a young Hugh Grant's chemistry. Like, we've covered Hugh Grant in a Hugh Grant episode previously, and this is sort of, I guess, the beginning of what Hugh Grant ends up playing a lot in the 90s, a little bit. But it's love to see that in the context of this movie, this time period, just fits so perfectly. So yeah, this is just such a fun movie. The side characters are great. The older lady and the husband whose cottage these three or four girls and their mom go and live with, they're super fun and funny. Even the quote unquote negative characters are also kind of a fun romp.
Yeah,
stepmother. The stepmother, and yeah, they're played kind of for laughs, but at the same time they're not cartoony. It's such a thin line, right? Because you have to believe into all of this, otherwise you wouldn't care, like the stakes wouldn't matter, and they do matter. They are laugh out loud moments, but you also weep a lot, at least I do, in certain scenes as this movie progresses. So yeah, it's a great all-around package, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a credit to both Emma Thompson and Ang Lee. I mean, having an outsider, someone who's not part of British culture, come in as the director, I think adds that energy of pushing something that was different and not just going after the Merchant Ivory formula in terms of how this movie would be constructed. And I think Emma Thompson also was trying to breathe some modern life into these characters to make them more relatable to a 90s audience. And I think she succeeds there too. So it's definitely a credit to both of them. And I think in terms of joy too, I mean, the thing you can read into this movie as well is around love, and that, Emma Thompson's character, she got the love that she wanted in Hugh Grant's character by just being patient, or not trying to go after it too much. And then Kate Winslet obviously falls for this guy, and maybe it wasn't really love in the beginning. It was more just infatuation with this perfect prince who could save her. She's fallen down in the rain, and he comes right at the right time, and it's almost like too perfect. And it wasn't really ever love, even though maybe he did love her, and I believe he probably did, but he didn't choose that. He chose to be he took the cowardly way out and went with someone who he would be able to get the finances from because he was broke. And there's a scene at the end where he kind of goes to the Kate Winslet's wedding and is like, oh crap, like I made the wrong choice. Like he's not happy, but everyone else in the end of that movie is happy. Like the main characters, because they, chose love and not money, which is a theme definitely of this movie, is those two things, and how in that society sometimes you have to just choose money because that's just a lot that you're given, but that doesn't give you joy.
No, exactly. And Jane Austen there's no better writer than playing with how money and class and your position in society kind of weaves through, your moral character, your relationships, what actually matters, right? She's always playing with the tension between them. We haven't mentioned Alan Rickman, by the way, who also is absolutely amazing in this movie. I know a lot of people sort of feel like this is odd casting because he's much older, and, is that a good match for Kate Winslet? And so, but I don't know. I like this pairing quite a bit, I think.
I still don't get it. I mean, I love Alan Rickman, but I'm like this. I don't understand why she ended up going
It
with him at
feels
the end,
period
honestly.
appropriate, I
Oh,
suppose.
sure. No, that feels, and I've never read the novel. I've not read any of Jane Austen's. I've only seen the
Yeah.
film adaptation, so I don't know what the ages were in the book. Though I'd imagine that was probably accurate because in that time, giant age gaps between men and women were something that
And
was
also
more
people
normal.
looked older. You look at all the
True.
movies from the 30s and 40s, people who are in their 40s, or people who look like they're in their 50s, they turn out to be there in their 20s.
Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah,
happens a lot.
yeah. All the smoke and the scotch, I think, ages you.
Exactly. But I'm glad you finally got a chance to sit down with this movie and,
As an
watch
adult.
it.
Yeah, it's great. And just again, shout out to Ang Lee, just how he can adapt all these different genres. He's just definitely a great filmmaker. Well, we should do an Ang Lee episode at some point. I feel like just
Yeah,
covering his career. It's a very interesting
yeah,
one.
agreed. All right. What is your number two movie that shaped your sense of joy?
So my number two film is Babe from 1995. This is a film directed by Chris Noonan, starring James Cromwell and Christine Cavanaugh. The plot summary: Babe, a pig raised by sheepdogs on a rural English farm, learns to herd sheep with a little help from Farmer Hoggett. So we're still in the English countryside, I guess. Okay. So this film, and the reason why this does give me joy is animals just bring me joy, and the bond between human and animal. In my life it's been dogs because those have been my pets, but I do feel like a kinship with all of God's creatures, all the animals out there. And it does just bring me joy to see not only these movies and these stories that you're really inside of the world of the animals and it kind of sees things from their perspective, but just the bond that can develop between animals and humans and how special and unique that is. And over the course of this film, Babe, who's the titular pig, they start out basically thinking about him as food and they're going to eat him. And that is, he sort of is kind of aware of it. And the farmer does not show any love towards the pig and just like, okay, this is going to be my food. And then over the course of the film, there's a relationship that develops where they end up being partners and win this competition at the end of the film on sheepdog. And the pig is taking the place of the sheepdog, which actually is another thing in that also can bring me joy, is this feeling of you having a passion and an interest in something and being able to go out and accomplish that despite what the society is telling you your role has to be. And there's a scene earlier on in this film where there's a duck who, again, to escape being eaten, is basically playing the role of a rooster and waking up the farmers in the morning and sort of going outside of the confines of being, fitting what the role of a goose should be. And he ends up really enjoying it and actually likes the role. And Babe also is a pig, and he's not meant to be herding sheep. That's what the dogs are there for. But Babe enjoys it and is good at it, and then gets rewarded at the end. And there's a lot of joy for me in people sort of finding out who they are and what their passions really are, and not just what society is telling them to do. I mean, the dogs, especially there's one male sheepdog who sort of represents the authority and the you got to stay in your lane type. He even gives a speech and says, like, to each creature his own destiny. Each creature has their own proper place. Like, you're a dog, you do this. You're a pig, you do this. You're a sheep, you do this. And I think there's a lot of joy in sort of finding your own lane and not just being in the lane that's given to you. So that's something also that I love about this film. Have you seen Babe the pig before? And what are your thoughts on this film?
I'd never seen it before. Obviously,
Oh,
know of
interesting.
it as this kind of,
Yeah.
surprising Oscar darling and interesting movie in George Miller's career, which is, so diverse in so many ways. But I never watched it because I sort of was like, oh, this is like a kid's movie, with pretend voices of animals and what have you. So I sort of never got to it. And I was wrong. And how
It's not really
pleasantly
a kids movie, really. I mean, it's super dark, but
it's super dark, but also like it's just very, very well done. I mean, there's a reason why this movie became so beloved. And I
mm-hmm.
watched it like now, it's an older movie, and I wasn't expecting it to hold up, but it holds up so beautifully. These themes have been done before. There have been so many movies with, quote unquote, more advanced CGI of
Mm-hmm.
animals being voiced by humans. There are a bajillion of those movies, but there's something very, I don't know, like very pure and kind of craftsman-y, sort of hand-drawn, even though it's not hand-drawn, but it feels
Mm-hmm.
very tactile and feels very personal and intimate. There's something, it doesn't have like jump cuts and, crazy reactions of things, falling from all over the place. Like
Right.
it movie has like a lot of breadth to it. It has like a very delicate hand to it, which is not what I was expecting from a movie like this. So I loved it. Of all the things you said in terms of joy, the other thing I would add to that, and I agree with what you said, but what I would add to that is this feeling of friendship, but unlikely friendships and kinships that you see in the
Yes.
movie, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
the female sheepdog who brings in Babe, because without her, Babe is probably gone in the
Right.
first 10 minutes, right? Because
Right.
she really adopts him and, shows him the ropes. And then later on, when Babe starts to discover his passion that he's good at herding sheep, there are a few sheep. There's one like older sheep who kind of connects with Babe and
Hmm.
develops this relationship. And I love how they find this language,
Yeah.
that herding doesn't have to mean yelling or being bossed around or being, led by fear. It can just be a conversation. It can
Yeah.
just be, oh, would you just walk over there? But this happens because there's this older sheep who, for the first time, gets to express how they feel and what they
Hmm.
are looking for in terms of direction. So it's a very organic kind of way of developing a new language of how Babe and the sheep communicate. And you see that just in front of your eyes. It's not expository, it's not spelled out. You just see it happen and unfold in front of you. And all of those moments are super joyous to watch. So yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's that partnership between animals, which
Yeah.
now there's all these TikToks that are like unlikely animal friends, and you watch like, oh look, a
Right,
bear is
right.
befriended like a donkey or whatever. It's maybe this movie is the inspiration for all these TikTok videos and etc. But just you're right, it is a partnership that forms between the animals too, and that's something that when you think of a sheep and a pig, you don't necessarily think about them as you think about them as the sheep stay in their herds, the pigs are in the sty or whatever. And there is something fun and just makes me smile when it's like, oh, the animals are all kind of friends together. Like, oh, this is cute.
Yeah.
Like, I love
Yeah.
this. It makes me happy. And I think with you were mentioning about the animals, this movie does a fantastic job of combining CGI in terms of the mouths, real
So well
animals, and
done.
then incredible animatronics. And I think that
Mm.
brings a sense of realism and to these performances instead of now all the animals would just be CGI, which sometimes can make it feel a little unnatural. And then they have to be
Right.
big exaggerated movements and like more of a cartoon. And this felt like real animals. I mean, yeah, their mouths are moving, so that's not real, but real more. There's a sense of reality to this that I
Yeah.
think this movie does really well.
That's good to hear because that's what I was trying to articulate, that it feels very tactile and human and personal. And I think that's why. We also haven't mentioned James Cromwell, who I think is so good in this movie, Oscar
He's excellent.
nominee.
Yeah.
Like doesn't have much to say, but his physicality, his expression on his face, like all of it is just so clear. You
Hmm.
understand his soul,
Yeah.
right from the get-go. And you see that progression and the friendship and the kinship he forms with Babe and just the whole farm that he, runs. Like it's just all there. Beautiful
Yeah.
performance.
No, it really is, and especially like at the end when they're in they're doing the sheep competition thing, and then the
Yeah.
pigs, does his good job. It's like, oh, that'll do, pig, and it just you can see that in
Yeah.
the sense of joy and sort of satisfaction in his face when he's talking to this pig, and then there's this great shot of the clouds sort of opening up and the sun sort of shines down on them, which I think the direction style of this is really interesting. It does feel a lot like you're looking at a picture book, which this was based on a book, which I did
Yeah.
read as a kid too. But
Mm.
the way that they frame these shots feel like drawings in a picture book instead of a movie. And I sort of like that there's this otherworldliness to this, even the production design. Like everything feels a
Yeah.
little bit off, not in like in a bad way, but like it would be in just an illustration, like a little exaggerated, like you're
Yeah.
reading a kid's book instead of either a super cartoony world or an incredibly like grounded in reality world. It's this really interesting balance, which this movie actually has too. It feels almost like a fable in the sense of there's a
It
lot of
totally
darkness to it.
does.
Like animals are getting killed. They're talking about
Yeah.
slaughter. Characters do die in this film in very realistic and sad ways, but it still is a kid's movie. It's this very unique film. And I think the tone of this is what is so hard to pull off. Either you feel so cartoony or it's like so dark and kind of twisted. It doesn't work for kids, but this movie does a fantastic job of doing both. And in the same way, similar vein to a movie we covered in our last episode, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I feel like they're both.
Yeah,
It feels like a Roald Dahl story almost too. Even though this is
it
not Roald
totally
Dahl. The
does.
Roald
Yeah,
Dahl can do that, thread that needle.
kind of a masterwork in terms of balancing the tone, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so why don't we move on to your number two? Are we still on the English countryside? Are we doing 3 for 3 here? Where are we going?
Well, I don't have the English countryside, but I do have English people involved.
Okay,
So that
okay.
theme continues, I suppose.
Continues, yeah.
So my number two movie that shaped our sense of joy is The Death on the Nile from 1978. Very important distinction. This is not the Kenneth Branagh movie. I repeat, this is not the Kenneth Branagh movie. So directed by John Gurman. I'm probably ruining this pronunciation, but starring Peter Ustinov, Mia Farrow, Betty Davis, Angela Lansbury, David Niven. It's like a all-star cast. Maggie Smith. But the quick logline of the movie is: as Hercule Poirot enjoys a luxurious cruise down the Nile, newlywed heiress is found murdered on board. Can Poirot identify the killer before the ship reaches the end of its journey? So this is on my list, and listeners probably know this from the past, is that I love British mystery movies. I love Poirot, Marple. This whole world is comfort and cozy to me, but also very joyous to me. So I just love that. I will say that we are a movie podcast. If I could put TV shows or series, the Poirot BBC series would probably be on the top when it comes to joy and comfort and delight and all of it. But this is the next best thing that I can put from like a movie standpoint. But yeah, there's something about, I guess, Agatha Christie's writing and cast of characters, and Poirot especially is such a fascinating character to me, quirky and odd and unpleasant, but also kind of charming and delightful, but obviously amazing in what he does. I like Agatha Christie's kind of trope of, how something happens and then everybody gathers in a closed space to kind of then go over the reveal of what has happened, and all of this brings me a lot of joy. And I think this movie obviously has all of that, but to top it all, it has exotic locations of being in Egypt, in this whole area. That the ship is such an amazing container, if you will, for the murder mystery, but also just visually amazing. And then, as if that were not enough, this is an all-star cast. I don't know if Peter Ustinov is my favorite Poirot. I mean, David Suchet from the BBC series, nobody can even reach him in my mind. He is Poirot. Like, it just is Poirot. But I like this kind of slightly campy and goofy rendition and interpretation that Peter Ustinov has. But to me, the scene stealers are the three, amazing legends of screen: Betty Davis, Maggie Smith, and Angela Lansbury. They're at their camp best in this movie. And it's just so delightful and joyous, to watch them, throw digs at each other. They're over the top. They're dressed in their fabulous costumes. By the way, this movie, I think, is an Oscar winner for costumes.
Oh.
And it should be. So yeah, so for all those reasons, this is very fun to me. But yeah, had you watched this movie before? Or what is your relationship with Poirot in general?
I've seen the covers of the VHS tapes at the library is my sort of experience with him. And it's not that I don't like mysteries, it just was never a genre in any sort of form, literary, television, or film, that I kind of gravitate towards. Though I do appreciate especially the Agatha Christie formula, which I've seen parodied more than I've seen or read the originals. So it just always interesting watching movies like this, which is the first time I've seen this one. I've not seen the remake either, so this is the first time I've just knew about this story.
I haven't seen the remake either, and I never will.
It's interesting going back and seeing something like this where I've seen the parodies so many times. Now it's like, oh, this is like the original story where these things come from. So it was a fun watch. I think the two things that stood out to me about this movie were the things you mentioned on the locations. I don't know if it was filmed in Egypt, but at least it was filmed somewhere that it looks like Egypt. Okay, so it was actual Egypt. That was really cool. Real locations, real sets, or not sets, like real like location versus what it looked like. I mean, I don't want to slag off the Brown movie because I haven't seen it, but it looked like that was just everyone in a room with green screen, right? And the cast was just great in this. Like, I was just surprised like how many people were in this, and then remembering, oh yeah, that sort of is a trope of these types of movies too, especially the Agatha Christie ones, where there's like 20 suspects and all of them are famous actors late in their career, like a Betty Davis, or famous sort of character actors like an Angela Lansbury. It's just fun to see all these folks in the same movie, like acting against one another. Mia Farrow, that was funny seeing her, like David Niven, like all these guys, like all in the same film. So that was fun to see. And, the mystery was interesting enough. The types of mysteries that I like are ones where this is more so in literary works than film, where I, as the audience member or the reader, I can figure it out along with the sleuth, instead of, the Agatha Christie formula is like, oh yeah, by the way, there's all these things that I didn't tell you earlier. I mean, they're there, but like I didn't draw attention, or I didn't even mention this, but oh yeah, this is how, like, the main character or the detective or whatever can figure it out. So the last 20 minutes is basically him in a room explaining all these things that you didn't even see because the movie didn't show you this. It's like, okay, well, I can't figure it out, but it was fun. I can see why this is a specific genre that, a lot of people in the world really love and that you gravitate towards too, not only as a sense of comfort, because there is a comfort in the formula of these types of movies, but also just in the execution. I thought it was good. Like, it was entertaining enough and felt also big enough for like a movie.
Yeah.
That it didn't really feel like, oh, this should have just been a mini series or just a PBS or BBC special. Like, no, they gave it the scope that it deserved. So it was an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, the locations and the actors and the star cast and all, like, really elevates it. That's why the BBC mysteries to me are better, because they're tighter. And they also spend a little bit more time in character development, especially of Poirot. Like, you really get to see his quirks and oddities either exhibited by him and also other people reacting to him. But because they're, bigger stars and things and bigger scope, what gets maybe a little bit shortchanged is all of those kind of idiosyncrasies, that Poirot is really known for. And to me, that is so much of the joy of this. It's less about the actual plot or the mystery or who done it. Like, sure, I am interested in that to a degree, but it's really more about just Poirot's, wackiness, if you will, and how other people bounce off of that. Like, that to me is sort of more fun. And then the setting where it's all happening. So there are elements of that here for sure. But yeah, I agree. Like, the latter half of the movie kind of drags quite a bit. Even though I am very familiar with the formula and I like it, it does drag. So it's not.
You need
perfect.
that though. It is the formula, right? It's at the end, you have to get him back in a room and be like, okay, I'm going to spend time explaining actually what happened to,
I know, but
part of what it's supposed to be.
In the TV series, not to be comparing to that again and again, like that is like 5 minutes at the end.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
oh,
you don't spend that much time typically. This is like a lot, but it's still quite fun. I quite enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a classic trope of this, is that you want that scene of the detective be like, actually, it was, you might think, but actually it was you, and like you were there, and it's like, no, it wasn't me, and then it's like, oh, it is, and then conveniently the murderer just happens to fall on a knife or something, because the hero can never kill the bad guy in these movies. Either like the suspects kill each other, or someone actually accidentally falls out a window or something, because the detective is just a passive observer who pieces everything together. They're not like an action star where they're gonna arrest, and the person can't get arrested either. If for some reason they never trust the law to prosecute, they have to always be someone dies. Typically, I mean, again, I'm not an expert of this genre, but when I've seen it kind of parodied, it's always like the suspect always, something happens. They fall off.
It's kind of dark in this movie, but in the typical Agatha Christie movies, there is Inspector Japp, who's kind of paired with Poirot, so they arrest the person. Typically.
Oh, okay, so someone does go to jail. Okay, it's not like the Disney villain of like, oh, accidentally fall off a mountain because the hero can't kill the villain. The villain has to accidentally kill themselves. Okay, but yeah, this was fun, and definitely. In seeing this movie, which again, I didn't even know this movie existed, to be honest. I never even heard of this story until the Kenneth Branagh one came out. I'm like, Death on the Nile, is that like a real Agatha Christie thing? And then I Wikipedia'd and I was like, oh, it is. So I didn't even know there was this. And seeing this movie now makes me more understand why the remake got so much negative criticism, even just through the trailers, because it just feels like a sort of a vapid, boring, CGI heavy retread of they did not bring in the best of the best actors in this. Also in the remake, it's like in this one, it's fun to see. Like I said, all these actors at various stages of their careers, they're legends. This new one, I mean, other than Kenneth Branagh, who he is a legend, but no one else in that remake was. So
Not
it like
really.
ruins a lot of the fun of movies like this, where you want the ensemble with a lot of interesting actors who've never acted together. Or you wouldn't expect them to be in the same scene as well. There's Betty
Yeah.
Davis and Angela Lansbury. Like, how cool is that? You know?
Exactly. And then I think it has that kind of 70s movie vibe, right? Like things are slower and there's a
Yeah.
lot of breadth in the movie. I love that. You really kind of get to sit with the location and the people, and all of that is great. Versus from the trailer of the new one, which again is unfair to even compare to this because they're in like totally different leagues. Like that just feels like jump cuts, you know. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like a commercial video essentially, not a movie at all.
Right.
The other thing I would say is that also, like, I find the 1920s, which is where most of these Agatha Christie or like Art Deco world is where these movies take place. I
Uh-huh.
love that setup. You know, this movie, of course, the costumes are over the top because we're dealing with some really over the top people.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's
mean,
fun though.
one of the characters, Angela Lansbury's character's name is Otome Solaborn. I mean, this is this is who we are dealing with.
Yeah.
But even so, A, fun, but B, just even people who are not over the top, I just love the costuming and the style and the lettering and all of that from that time period just is very fun and joyous to me. So yeah, I'm glad you had a chance to check it out. I would say if you're ever in the mood, check out the BBC series, and I
Okay.
can recommend certain episodes to you. Like it's just so fun, and just watching David Suchet, who basically gave his whole life to
To this
play
part, yeah.
Poirot,
Yeah, over
is just
decades. Yeah.
so, yeah, amazing. And what a, through and through transformation. It's moving to me to kind of watch him do that.
That's cool. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll definitely, if I'm in the mood for a cozy mystery, let you know which episodes I should check out first.
Sounds good. Okay, so it's time for our number ones. What is your number one, Alex?
Yeah, so I'll kick us off on the number ones here. My number one movie that shaped my sense of joy is School of Rock from 2003. This is a film directed by Richard Linklater, a director who's come up a lot on the podcast, but now I'm bringing
Mhm.
forth a film from him. I know you've done it several times.
Yep.
The movie stars Jack Black, Mike White, Joan Cusack, and Miranda Cosgrove. The IMDb plot summary of this film: after being kicked out of his rock band, Dewey Finn becomes a substitute teacher of an uptight elementary private school, only to try and turn his class into a rock band. So this movie is joyous to me in a number of different ways. So I'll kind of get into those and we can dive more into the film. So first, it's just the joy of, this movie is about the joy of making music and coming together and putting on a performance, which is something that I've been involved in like a lot growing up. And I love movies and stories where it's like the let's put on a show plot line. I that gets me every time. And I love the end performances when they're then putting the show is on, and like it always
Same.
makes me smile and just makes me just feel great. So those are my favorite types of movies for joy for me, and this is a great encapsulation of that. There's also a theme in this movie too around breaking the rules and rebelling against conformity and the man, they say in this movie a lot. And there is, for me at least, joy in rebellion or in not following what you're supposed to do. If you want to do something, you're just going to go do it. And a lot of the theme in this movie is how Jack Black's character sort of teaches these kids who are all just about following the rules. They're not happy. They're being told by their parents what to do, by their administrator, by formerly their teacher, and they don't have any joy in their lives. And Jack Black teaches them through the music of rock and roll, which, as he says, is all just about sticking it to the man, fighting power, and being rebellious, which is what the heart of that music genre is, unlocks joy in them, and they all find their place in the rock band, but also just in their lives, and they find their passions and things, because it's not just about conforming to what society tells you to do. And that is something, again, that brings me a lot of joy as well. And then too, and I'll get more into this at the when we kind of dive more to the film, is just how finding your passion in life and bringing that passion to others and teaching them about it just brings you so much joy. I mean, Jack Black's character, one of the reasons why I love this movie and works so well, is he has a very defined character arc, and he discovers in him, through a lot of the things that the story uses as exemplifiers of his character arc, but finds the passion that he has, which is to teach and to work with others instead of think that he's the star of his own movie and he's a lead singer of everybody. Everything's about him, and he realizes it's actually not about him. It's really about what he can give and share to other people, and that also brings me joy a lot too when I'm able to share my passions with others and inspire others to do things, whether it's music or things in work environment, whatever it is. I enjoy. I've never been a professional teacher, but I do enjoy the opportunities when I've been able to do that. Whether it's mentoring or tutoring and things like that over my life. And there is a joy in seeing you pass that passion and knowledge on to others. And they just do a fantastic job in this movie with his character arc, which I'll get into a little more later around what Jack Black's able to pull off. So this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I saw it when it first came out. I was a big Jack Black fan and just blew me away. And still to this day, like, it makes me smile every time I even think of it, this movie. So it brings me a lot of joy. Have you seen this movie before? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I feel like this is a fun episode where we had not seen each other's movies in the past. And this is, again, one of them, which I'm actually shameful to admit because I love all Linklater movies. And I think I just ignored this movie because I felt from the trailer and the poster what has become Jack Black energy, right? Which you kind of have to be in the mood for. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just going to be so over the top. And I didn't watch it when it came out. So you sort of missed the boat a little bit. It was so fun to watch this movie and sort of go back to where Jack Black energy comes from, actually. Like, this is where it started, it seems, right? Or was he doing this thing before?
Yeah, this was his this is his energy. And I think, and we can talk more about it too, because I think this is the movie that captures it and uses it in the best way, in the most effective way, in any way that he's been used. And I think it has a lot to do with Richard, which we'll get into in a bit. So so it worked for you, like hit the Jack Black.
It totally worked. It was so well done for all the things you called out, music and sharing and mentorship. But what I also love is, which is again, it's Linklater, right? So a movie like this in a lesser known director or writer's hands would be very prototypical. People would be painted in sort of glorious black and white light, which to me is never a good sign because it's not real. People aren't like that. So you see all the sides where Jack Black is quite annoying. He is destructive to himself and people around him. And it's not just Mike White and Sarah Silverman who are his friends, who can be viewed as, quote unquote, annoying, but they're also trying to get by life, and Jack Black is not helping at all. Like, he's just like squatting in their place and is pretty destructive to his friends and his life and is very self-centered. He's kind of a schlub, doesn't put in the work, wants stuff handed over to him. And you need that for like you said, his arc to kind of really flow through the movie. But for us to kind of believe in all this, right? Like, this is not some glorious tale of somebody who came and saved the day. Like, this is somebody who is finding himself as the movie goes on. So I love that. Number two, all the kids in the movie are amazing, just from a performance standpoint, but also how much depth and character they're given in like little scenes. Like, everybody has their own thing. They come from different background. Like, today, if this movie was made, I kept thinking that this movie in a way is ahead of its time, if you will, because it's a very racially diverse group of kids. But it's not underlined in like a phony kind of way that, oh, we have like a racially diverse set of kids and everybody is perfect because they're from so and so background. No, they're just kids, and they come from everywhere, and they all have their hang-ups, they all have their annoyances and what have you, and they all have to be pushed in certain ways, but they're also gifted in certain ways. So it just doesn't even go there and kind of overcomplicate things in that sense. It's just very simple. They're just kids, and I love that. And then I think the last thing I would say is that Joan Cusack was always amazing in everything.
He's great, yeah.
Her and Jack Black's chemistry, and also her as kind of the marker of the quote unquote prim and proper right way to do things,
the man,
is great because she's also human, like she's also just following the rules and doing her best, but there is like a wilder side to her, and at the end of the movie she's cheering for the kids as well. And I love what an odd couple and chemistry they have in the few scenes that they share. There's like a light flirtation, there's
Mm-hmm.
a light, seeing each other for who they are. Like, it's just so well written and beautifully performed, and the music is great, and you're rooting for everybody by the end of it. So it's a perfect number one, Alex. I love
Oh,
it.
thanks. I mean, I just love this movie,
Yeah.
and I'm surprised just with your fan of being such a fan of Richard that you hadn't kind
Yeah.
of come to this. But I think this is, in my mind, is my favorite movie of his by a country mile, and it's just interesting that he's able to take a lot of his sensibilities, especially on the direction, into making this movie work. And I think, again, just talking about Jack Black's performance, he has a lot of passion and energy, and I think joy too, in anything that he does. But a lot of times it's almost too much, and
And it's
movies don't know how
misguided.
to contain him or direct this
Yeah.
energy. And what I think that they do so brilliantly in this movie is a lot of these parts where Jack is just unleashing his energy is just a single shot, and the camera's not doing anything. You're just letting him operate in this environment. They're not adding any editing into it, cutting around his energy. Just he's there, just doing his Jack Black thing. Whereas maybe the camera's slowly panning back. There's a scene where he is telling the kids what the song that he had wrote about, that he wants the band to perform. It's all about himself, and this is before he completes his arc. And he's there, sort of like singing the song and doing his scat singing. It's like he's like doing all that, and all the
Good.
camera is just one shot and just slowly pulling back because it's Richard knows, like, look, this guy has so much energy. He's gonna fill the frame. I'm not gonna do anything here. I'm just gonna let him go. And there's another great scene, which is one of my favorite ones too, where he's teaching the kids. Eventually, they're doing like Smoke on the Water, and he's teaching them each of their parts. And again, the camera just slowly moving around as he's doing this, and they're not like create the humor or the energy through anything filmic techniques. They're just letting Jack do all of that because he has so much energy. They don't want to contain that, right? And I think that is just so brilliant, and that's why I think Jack works so well in this movie, because they let
Mhm.
Jack be Jack, not try to change, what his natural energy is, which is just this. I mean, I've been following him since High Fidelity. We talked about that movie before. And then he's
Right.
also in a band, Tenacious D, that I was obsessed with in college. And it's the same crazy, like he, does these like overly exaggerated, guitar solos and moves, and is like very crazy songs, and gets all this energy. And I love that about him, but it's hard to kind of make that work in a mainstream film. And I think Richard does that so well, and just how he captures Jack Black's energy. And it's so great.
I totally agree. And there's nuance in that where the movie knows that this guy is kind of a joke, but at the same time doesn't judge him for it, Like, there is kind of a love and adoration for who this person is, just the way he is, which sort of
Mm-hmm.
is the message of the movie too, because Jack Black, he also takes each of these kids at face value. I love
Right.
every interaction that he has with the kids to kind of bring him out of their shells. Like the Asian guy who's sort of, it's such a heartbreaking thing he says that, no one talks to me, I have no friends and
Yeah.
such. But he's like, no, you're the man,
Right.
you're amazing at what you do. Same goes for the black girl who, it's hilarious. She's like, she's like, I don't want to do this. She's like, what do you want to do? Security?
Right.
But
Yeah.
she's
Because
sort of a
she's like
bigger
bigger. Yeah.
girl.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, no, I want to sing. And then she like belts out this whole Aretha song, and it's
Yeah.
like absolutely incredible. And the way it's captured and the way you see the brilliance of these kids and the dimensions of these kids through Jack Black,
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of the winning power of the movie. And
Definitely.
it's just so pure, the reactions that you're getting from him. But at the same time, like we said earlier, he's no saint either, because
No.
as the band starts to get together, he's like, oh, I'm going to use this to get my thing,
Mm-hmm.
my own song. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot for him to get to a place where he's like, no, actually, the little kid, he's going to do the lead song, and it's going to be his song,
Right.
not one of my songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I love seeing the parents, the crowd as well, who are so proud of their kids. They didn't even realize that their kids were so talented and such. So no one is a bad person actually, because by and large, maybe I have like a optimistic in my dotage point of view that people are just, slaves to kind of whatever thing they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just have to be shaken up a little bit to see beyond the horizon, if you will. And this movie does that in a very non-preachy, fun, real, grounded kind of way.
Definitely. And this is another movie trope of a conformed society where a crazy, like, so off the wall character comes in and shakes it up so everyone can, which is also
Right.
a plot that I love. And that is
Yeah, I
about
love that.
those characters come in and they bring joy by bucking conformity and expectation. It's like, look, you do what you want to do. And the other thing that I think this movie does so well too is, yes, it's School of Rock and it's a band and they sing a song and they put on a performance at the end. But there's a great sequence in the film too when he chooses all the, okay, you play bass, you're going to be the lead guitar, and then the rest, it's only like 6 members of the band. So the rest of the class, like, well, what are we going to do? Like, what? We're going to be the audience? He's like, no, you're going to be the lighting guy, you're security, you're the manager, you're the costumes, and they don't. He doesn't do
Yeah,
that just as I'm going to give you busy work.
they're
It's
all
showing
important.
everyone come together, and I love
Yeah.
too at the end of the movie during the performance sequence at the Battle of the Bands. You see it cuts to like the guy on the computer. He's doing his laser show, and they're putting the
Right.
smoke on there, like the manager and the security, and like you really see that this really does take a village. It's not just about the band; it's about everyone, and everyone finds their place in this performance. And one job is no lesser than the other. And I love that too. It really brings everyone together in that solidarity. And just one other note that I love that I really noticed over the years and watch this film, I've seen this plenty of times, is how they really do a great job visually of kind of nailing Jack Black's character arc. And at the very beginning of the movie, he's with his band and they're performing, and Jack Black is thinking that he's the star of the show. He's overly, theatrical. And then he does a stage dive and no one catches him and he plants himself on the ground. It's like, this
Yeah.
is not working. At the end of the movie, he's performing a song written by somebody else. Yes, he's the lead guitarist and he's singing some of the vocals, but it's entire band, and he does a stage dive and he's caught. And it just shows that now that he's able to remove his ego from it, and he finds the joy in sharing his passion with others by inspiring them instead of sort of shoving down his performance down their throats. It's such a wonderful kind of a visual representation of how far this character's come from the beginning of the movie to the end. It sort of like starts and ends with a stage dive, and he's carried by the crowd. And I just love that moment too. It's like he's found his place, which is there's a lot of joy in that too. He's able to find what he's supposed to do, which is to be a teacher. And also I love too so much the end of the movie during the credits, which is another thing I just love when they do, credits over like a performance in movies.
Right.
And it's just Jack Black there with the kids doing this great AC/DC song. And you can tell it's not acting from anyone.
No,
like
it's
they're just
real.
hanging out. Jack's having a good time. The kids are singing. He's like, oh, do the solo here. And the kids are, because they all can actually play. They found incredible actors who can do all these parts. And you can see the sense of joy just in the fact that these actors just loved hanging out together. And there was a real connection and camaraderie there. It wasn't just they're acting the parts. They really love singing and love performing and love rock. And I love that end credits. Sometimes I just watch that on YouTube of them just kind of jamming out. It's so awesome. It's so infectious.
So and I guess I was going to say, as you were saying that, is that it's kind of meta in that sense that movie sets can also be this way, right?
Yeah.
That it's people come in having fun and not, I mean, I don't know Linklater personally, but that's the kind of guy he feels like. He's kind of a mensch, right? Like he's this mentor and brings people together and discovers young talent, but is not like authoritarian and preachy, lets everyone breathe and find what their unique thing is and advises them, in a way that feels authentic to them, but doesn't push them.
Right.
There are no like mind games and tricks happening to bring out, the weird best in people, whatever. No, it just feels like a very happy, organic environment where people get to discover and shine. And if it's meant to be, it will be, you know? And it's so great. That school, no pun intended, has paid off with all these amazing actors and actresses that have come through the Richard Linklater School of Rock.
Yeah. I mean, some of these actors are now, Miranda Cosgrove is a huge star now because, she was, I don't know if she was discovered in this film or not, but she does a great job in this performance. But yeah, I think it is a lot to, like I said, Richard Linklater. And I think the Richard Linklater plus it's Richard Linklater more laid back, kind of let things happen, and the Jack Black energy, I think it's just a winning combination that Jack has never been better in a movie. Maybe High Fidelity, but that's a very specific under co-starring role. But this is just his crown achievement as an actor. Totally. Love it. I'm glad you're finally able to rock out to the School of Rock. Okay, Karan, let's go to your number one movie that shaped your sense of joy. Another musical movie, right?
Yep, we are staying on theme. In fact, Very similar setups, if you will. So my number one is Sister Act from 1992, directed by Emile Ardolino. I hope I'm saying that right. Starring Whoopi Goldberg, Maggie Smith, Harvey Keitel, and a great cast of nuns, if you will. Quick logline: when a nightclub singer is forced to take refuge from the mob in a convent, she ends up turning the convent choir into a soulful chorus, complete with a Motown repertoire until the sudden celebrity of the choir jeopardizes her identity. That's a pretty good logline.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a classic. I mean, it sounds like the way School of Rock was for you. This has been in my rotation canon since kind of the beginning of times. I can't remember a time where I've not been aware of this movie for some reason. And I think it's sort of similar to what we were just talking about the School of Rock. It's music, it's an odd duck who's maybe selfish and kind of stuck in their life, enters this very opposite kind of environment from their own predicament and their own situation, and this clash. And then through that clash, they discover common ground. And in this case, the common ground once again is music. And that bonds this whole group of odd ducks together. There's some hijinks, and then there's a great performance at the end that wins hearts and things. But it's peppered with Whoopi Goldberg, who I think is amazing. And we've covered a few Whoopi movies in the past that I brought, like The Associate. I think this is probably in her pantheon of movies in my mind. Like whenever I think of Whoopi, I always think of Sister Act. Nobody does feeling irritated and uncomfortable better than Whoopi. This is the faces she makes and the quick jab she has, and it just makes me so happy always. But you get to see like a kinder, tough love side to her in this movie. And the real joy of the movie is just seeing all these different nuns who've all had their own stories and lives and such come together, find that passion, just the way we were talking about in some of our previous picks, and come together, find more meaning in life and band together. And even the quote unquote bad guy, Maggie Smith, in this movie, you get her side as well. Like these movies, once again, like School of Rock, this movie can be kind of superficial, where you don't really buy the conflict because the characters are not grounded enough or they're too one-dimensional. That's not the case here. Maybe the writing may not be as elevated as, say, a Richard Linklater movie is, but the performances do the work, I think, to kind of really ground everybody and make them three-dimensional people. And then the last thing I would say before I throw it to you, and then we can dive in more, is that this movie is shot in San Francisco, and this church where the movie takes place is like a few blocks away from where I live. So I'm very familiar with just the church. I mean, the outside setup of the church, what the streets they showed, that looks like a different place, or who knows, maybe this is how it was back then.
It's probably a backlot, potentially. Like the scenes when it was all like the rough neighborhood, like that looked like a backlot to me.
Probably, yeah. Although, San Francisco is going through some interesting changes, so who knows?
That's true, yeah.
But so yeah, it's this movie now. It's so weird to me after watching this movie growing up, and to be now living so close to where this church is. It's kind of a fun little gag. Like I go for my walk or my run and get coffee, and I see this church, and I always, think about this movie and its songs. You watched this movie before?
Yeah, I saw this as a kid, and I loved it as a kid. And it's funny actually watching this and then School of Rock. I rewatched them both in the same week, and they are essentially the same movie. I feel like it's the same. There's a lie revealed storyline. It's the crazy, sort of a wild card thrown into a situation, and then through the wildness, and then through music. And there's a big performance at the end. This person teaches everyone else to loosen up a little bit, because loosening up is good. And they both work so well at that, I think. And both of them are starring a very, specific comedic actor and how they like to perform. And I think this, for me, is a signature Whoopi role. I think this really put her on the map as a big star in the 90s for like family comedies. It was really due to her performance in this, which she does such a good job in this film. And this film, not only just with her, but as a lot of the side characters, much like in School of Rock too, where the kids, it's like
Yeah.
Catherine and Najimy is just infectious as that
Amazing.
nun, and then the other sort of more closed off, kind of quiet nun who then she gets the
Yeah.
big solo, and you just love watching all these
And the
characters
older
kind of
nuns
change. Oh,
too,
the
they're
older nuns are
so
so cute.
cute.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's something joyous in watching
Yeah.
people kind of like loosen up, discover their passions. Sort of more quiet or reserved nun I mentioned, she's like, oh, I just always wanted to just give something to the world that was just
Right.
mine, like to be able to give my joy and my energy out to the world. And there is a joy in that.
Yeah.
But then also joy in seeing somebody do that, like open up and then find their passion. And you see her at the end, and she's just amazing, and everyone's loving. Her voice is so great, and she's able to come out of her shell through music. And there's a joy in finding yourself through that. And I think this movie does such a great job with that. I mean, the actual plot is a lot more cheesy and sort of convenient than like Ghoul Rocks. Oh, he's a substitute teacher. Here is like there's like a mob hit gone wrong, and
Right.
she's got to. But
But I
that's
kind of
silly. Hey,
love
it's silly.
that.
I love that too. That's what it's
Yeah.
silliness to it that makes it fun. Like it's totally unrealistic, but who cares? Like just get
Yeah.
Whoopi in a habit in a nunnery. Like that's the plot's like, how do we do that in a way just to get her in there? Because at that point, this movie's going to be great. And I sort of think there's a fun that there's a cheesiness to that works for me. As always smiles when I see like that part of it, like the Harvey Keitel mob boss stuff. I'm like, oh, this is just so silly, but hey, it's fun. It's
It sort
sister
of
act.
works on me. And then all
Yeah,
the gags of like, oh, this she's a nun, even though she's not a nun, so we can't really kill her or do things to
I
her.
loved that
I
part.
love
Yeah,
all of those bits. And then how like all the nuns like guilt trip the guys to kind of, rent the jet so they can get to Vegas. Like all of
yes,
those
yes.
things are amazing. Also, the other fun part about this movie is that kind of like with some of the other movies that we talked about, like don't read, the book based on its cover. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't spend that much time in our lives, unfortunately, thinking about who these people are, meaning nuns, like what their lives are,
Yes.
what their routine looks like, how are they with each other, how do they view the world. And uh, again, it's a movie, it's not a documentary, but I love sort of showing in a very casual way like who these people are, what their day-to-day looks like. I kind of love that. I mean, they could have done this in any setup, but it's specific, like choosing this setup to kind of shed light on people that we don't often think about. So there's an instant kind of curiosity from the audience standpoint
Mm-hmm.
that you want to learn and you want to see what happens. Like when these nuns follow Whoopi earlier in the movie at this bar,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're playing with the jukebox and such, and you're like, oh, actually, these people had lives before they came here. They of
Right.
course have tastes and love music and like to dance and do things. Like they're just not people, with none of those human aspects. So I love that the movie brings all that to the forefront.
No, no, me too. And it's interesting as well in a movie where could have been mocking of the role of a nun, religion
Yeah.
in general. Like it very easily could have made fun of all that, but there is yes, it's a comedy, but
Yeah.
it doesn't ever poke fun at the nuns for being nuns. It's more just a classic, like, oh, you guys are too uptight. It's not doing anything specific. And this rewatch too is interesting, just seeing how the religion is in the church. Let's say like the Catholic Church in the beginning of the movie was something that was Whoopi was like didn't like it, and it was like oil and water, and
Yeah.
and they show her growing up and not enjoying the Catholic school and always being the rebel and pushing back, and then
Mhm.
even she has a relationship with Harvey Keitel, the mobster, who is married, I believe, or has a other
Yeah.
girlfriend. She's like the other
As a
woman,
man.
and he's gonna run off with her, but then realizes, oh, the church says I shouldn't do this. This is a sin. So the church is actually ending her like romantic relationship. Like the church in a way is doing all these things to antagonize it, like the antagonist in the film thematically. And then
Mm-hmm.
once she goes in there, all of a sudden now the church actually, like you were pointing out earlier, saves her life in the sense of these hitmen are about to kill her, and they're like, wait a second, you're a nun, like we're not going to do it. So when she now lets that into her life and realizes this is not a thing necessarily that I should be pushing against, like the church kind of saves her
Yeah.
literally, but then also thematically throughout this film. And I thought that was just an interesting way to weave the religion themes into this movie without making this just be like, oh, this is like Nuns on the Run, which is a famous 80s comedy where
Right.
it's not about the religion, it's more of the sight gags and, oh, these are guys that are pretending to be nuns. Like I just like how this movie, there's a sweetness to that too, and showing, yeah, there is a joy in what these nuns do. We're not
Yeah.
belittling that. It's just they need to loosen up a little bit and maybe sing some more recent songs.
Yeah, and then on Whoopi's part, her arc is that of you know, kindness and responsibility and open-mindedness. Like, where is her life going before, right?
Nowhere.
And
Yeah.
Maggie Smith points that out. Like last time I checked, like your music career is in the dumps.
Right.
The guy that you're in love with, you're the other one in his life, and he's gonna dump you, and now he's after your life. Like that's where
Right.
you're at. Let's just be very clear of where you're at, and by the end of it, she finds purpose and takes accountability of her own actions. And she's never really used her gift of music in a big way either. And that I love that. Like, same with Jack Black. These are rebels characters for rebels' sake. Like, what is that giving them? It's more of a cover of to their laziness or the poor choices that they made,
Mm-hmm.
and being non-conformist for like the heck of it. Like, what is the plan here? There is no plan for
Right.
any of these people.
Right.
So it's kind of fun to kind of break that, to then say, okay, you do have this rebel spirit. Let's figure out how we can channel that in a way that's constructive to you and the society, and then formulate the plan. And that could mean you conforming in certain ways. And that to me is life, right? Like, if you're just going to be a rebel, sure, you can do that and maybe some good comes out of it, but usually it has to be channeled in a meaningful way. You can't just be a rebel with no plan, no agenda whatsoever. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to throw James Dean under the bus, or maybe I shouldn't use a car crash reference talking to him, but rebel without a cause, like you're just,
Yeah.
what are you? You're useless. Like I have no, sympathy for characters that just have rebels without, you need a cause. And I think both Jack Black's character in School of Rock and Whoopi Goldberg's character in Sister Act start out with rebels without causes. But then once they find a cause for their rebellion, there is joy in that. Like I was saying in the School of Rock episode, in sharing that rebellious spirit with people that need a little bit of shaking up. Right. And I think you're totally right. Both these characters too grow through, they use their rebellion for good instead of just anarchy, for lack of a better, or use an excuse to cover up the fact that their lives are pretty sad. Like Jack Black, who doesn't have a career, is late on his rent. Whoopi Goldberg is singing in these, much better singer than she deserves to be, in like a lounge act in like a casino in Reno. Like you could be doing much bigger things, and you think maybe she could have, but this movie gives her that gift of her purpose now is inspiring others to loosen up a little bit and have a little more fun, and spread the joy to the neighbor. I love that 80s montage, even though it's a 90s movie, but the little 80s montage of them cleaning up the town and all the nuns now actually. I love too, in the fact that she is inspiring them to leave the church and the covenant, to go out into the neighborhood and spread their joy and help other people, instead of just sort of stay locked up. And there's sort of a they're literally coming out of their shell, the shell of the physical church, and Whoopi is inspiring them to do that. I think that I love that sequence when they're all out there and there's this song. It's very 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 joyous, and it makes me smile every time I see it.
Yeah, they're both kind of pushing each other. And then of course the musical performances, amazing. How the choir is so bad, how they come together, and the dancing that goes, every nun, the old ones too, they all get their own little bits to shine. And I just love just so much of joy and kind of tenderness to all of that.
It's just funny. It struck me, especially even in talking about it on this episode, not only just watching the two movies back to back, is our number ones are basically the same movie, and the same themes and the same everything, and they're both awesome. And I love both of these movies so much. And Sister Act, I was watching it way before School of Rock because it came out 10 years earlier, and it just maybe how music too brings joy to our both of our lives.
Yeah, totally agree.
But we're not singing, though. We're not going to sing on this episode. Maybe at a future episode we should do one about our love of song, and we can do a duet at the end.
Oh, you're tearing me apart since you mentioned Over the Cause.
So what were some other films that are joys to you but just didn't quite make the list?
So I think food and travel is my other big joy topic. So movies that we've covered in the past, like Julie and Julia was on my list. Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe, like that's an amazing one. Then all the childhood movies of Mary Poppins and A Sound of Music that we've also covered on the podcast, like they were on my joy list as well. How about you?
For me, a lot of movies we already covered. So the entire Pitch Perfect trilogy, we covered those. Again, similar putting on a show movies, music. I love that. Bend It Like Beckham, which we covered. And then movies similar to School of Rock in the sense of a kind of infectious, joyous personality in Jack Black. So Pee-wee's Big Adventure with Pee-wee Herman, and then UHF with Weird Al. Those movies always bring a smile to my face. And then another movie we covered, Rocky, which is just the joy of the self-discovery that he has and the triumph at the end of that film. I always puts a smile to my face too. But this was a really fun episode. I love when these more positive themes, it's the holidays, it's a joyous time, and it's nice just to kind of get into these movies, even though they're not directly about the holidays. It definitely puts me in the holiday mood because this is such a joyous time of year.
I totally agree. And it's a good reminder that putting on these movies is a good gateway into the joyous holiday spirit, no matter what time of the year it might be.
Exactly.
So, Alex, what are we doing for the next real episode and our bonus episode?
Yeah, so our bonus episode shall be coming out next week on an actor we both love, and that's Bradley Cooper. So we're covering him. He has a big new film coming out, Maestro, that he co-wrote, directed, and starring in. So we're going to cover that film and then also the bulk of his career. And then after that, our final actual full episode of the year is movies that shaped our 2023. So this is something that we do every year. It's not movies that are our favorite movies of the year, but we think back on what did this year represent to us in our lives and what movies best exemplify how we were feeling throughout this year. So that'll be a really interesting and fun episode. And that'll be our final one of the year before we go into our break in January. So looking forward to that.
All right. Well, hope you enjoyed this discussion and hope you are getting ready for the holidays, spending time with friends and family, and hopefully sprinkling some music and good food in that. As always, we are available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, where you can also find reviews of each of the movies that we've covered. Please rate and review us, and don't forget to subscribe, because all of that really helps, other listeners discover and find us. But yeah, until next time, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
That'll do, pig.